Zirian. Carrie has the day off. Of course, I'm alongside Stephen A. Smith, Skip Bayless. Now, since yesterday's show, we've seen more developments.
See, I know you're new to this, but we do our regular handshake because it's the only time we get along.
Right?
At the top of the first 5 seconds. And after that, I don't like him very much.
But I've seen you guys get along.
And by the way, you're supposed to introduce me first. It's okay. Let's get to it.
Clearly, I didn't read the memo. All right.
It's all right.
All right, we'll get into fun later in the show. But since yesterday's show, we've seen more developments involving Ray Rice. The Ravens cut their 3-time Pro Bowl running back, and the NFL suspended Rice indefinitely. All this after TMZ released video from inside the elevator. We're about to show you the video again. Of course, we want to warn you, the images are disturbing. This incident, you might remember, occurred last February. Rice and his then-fiancée, Janae Palmer, at the Revel Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City. We'll just let the images occur while you soak it in. TMZ reporting the NFL never asked the hotel for this video throughout the investigation. Now, the NFL released a statement yesterday. We requested from law enforcement any and all information about the incident, including the video from inside the elevator. The video was not made available to us, and no one in our office has seen it until today. Now, in response to inquiries from ABC News, the New Jersey State Police says the statement from the NFL cannot be accurate. New Jersey State Police spokesperson said, quote, investigations of the incidents on the casino floor are handled by the New Jersey State Police, but this occurred in the elevator and was handled by the Atlantic City Police Department. We never had the video. All right, guys, obviously contradicting statements even before yesterday's developments. Last week, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell apologized for how the league handled the situation. Now this video yesterday, Stephen A. Smith, should the commissioner's job be in jeopardy?
No, it should not. Having said all of that, let me be clear. It is my personal belief, and only my personal belief, Skip, that the National Football League is lying. I'm going to say it again. I think they're lying through their teeth. And what I mean by that is that don't give the impression that you've did your due diligence in order to get the video. You have FBI agents. You have other law enforcement officials that are members of the security department of a National Football League that is a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, which stands to reason that individuals who work for you on the security front are elite individuals. To make the implications that the NFL has made in terms of putting in the request and doing what they could to get a hold of this video, what you're essentially doing is throwing your security department under the bus. Now, either they are incompetent or the NFL's lying. And I believe that I'm going to believe that the NFL is lying before I believe that the NFL security department is incompetent, because the NFL is too elite to hire incompetent individuals to be ahead of its security. Skip Bayless, I've been covering the NBA for about 20 years. There's an individual who is now retired. You know this name when I say it. His name is Horace Ballmer. He is the former head of security for the NBA. I have known him for 2 decades. Let me be very, very clear. And I'm going to put myself on Front Street with this. This dude is retired, chilling out, owns a club, has a spot in Harlem. You know, life is kind of good for him. Presided over the NBA, Commissioner Stern's right-hand man in security for the better part of 2 decades. If this had happened to the NBA, Horace Ballmer would have had this video before sundown, the day it happened. This dude is that connected.
Sure.
I don't believe for 1 second that the NFL doesn't have somebody up in there that is that connected. Not when you have the New York Jets and the New York Giants right in East Rutherford, New Jersey, playing at MetLife Stadium, and the Philadelphia Eagles playing right down the turnpike in Philadelphia, because you got 3 teams in the local area with Atlantic City within a 45-minute to an hour proximity.
Yep.
Really? The casino? This ain't Vegas. This is Atlantic City. It's the closest thing to Vegas. You understand the importance of being connected to that particular geographical area, because you certainly don't want dudes gambling. You don't want dudes getting themselves in trouble at a casino, whether they're being inebriated or whatever the case may be, running into unsavory characters that hang out at casinos. You don't want that. So there is no way on earth and I wasn't willing to go this far yesterday, but reading the NFL's response, reading what the PD in Atlantic City had to say, or New Jersey rather, listening to some of the things that the NFL said, I'm just sitting there. And then keep this in mind as well. You didn't have the video, but the Baltimore Ravens had the information, and the information appeared to be accurate. Well, if you have the information, okay, the video helps substantiates it and definitely provides a greater impact. But in the end, Skip Bayless, the bottom line is very, very simple. The National Football League, in my opinion, looks as if they're lying when they say they put forth their due diligence. I'm not saying that they're lying about seeing the video.
All right.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay,
I'm saying they're lying about we put forth our due diligence. We did everything we could to get a hold of this video. There's no way on earth you did that.
Okay.
Not if you're the National Football League.
Okay, now we're on the same page. Originally, I was going to cross-examine your first point about they lied about, about not having seen the video.
No, I wasn't saying that.
I got it. I got it. To me, this commissioner didn't drop the ball. He chose never to pick the ball up in this situation. So, to me, what we're dealing with here is what I would call willful negligence on his and the league's part, premeditated negligence, where the league decided we're just going to steer clear here. We're going to basically choose not to get involved. We're going to choose to look the other way, just the way they have historically on every big domestic violence case that has come down their path.
Okay.
So in this case, do I think the commissioner's job should be in jeopardy? I do. Do I think it will be in jeopardy? I do not, because I think these owners really like this commissioner because he's kept them all together. They get along well. We just had a statement from your favorite owner, Mr. Kraft in New England, who said on CBS this morning that the way Roger handled the situation himself, coming out with the mea culpa in his statement a couple of weeks ago and setting a very clear policy on how we conduct ourselves in the NFL, I thought it was excellent. Well, that's probably going to be a ringing endorsement that you'll hear from most of the top owners. Maybe they're all complicit in this. I have to believe that all the top decision makers along this trail of the last month or so chipped in and chimed in on how this should be handled. Because don't you agree with me, and I know Adam Schefter said it to open the show yesterday, this is the worst this league has ever looked.
Yeah.
Has it ever looked worse? I know Adam brought up something that I lived through, which was Pete Rozell's one regret as commissioner. We're going way back. But his decision to play football on the Sunday after John F. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963, which was a Friday. So that was his, so to speak, cross to bear. Roger Goodell's had a bunch of incidents here. We had Bountygate, we had Spygate, we had the Riley Cooper, we've had HGH or lack thereof testing, we've had the replacement refs, and now we come to this. This is the worst taint of all for a league that prides itself so much on its image and its brand and the strength thereof with its fans. Don't you think that the NFL has never looked worse?
I don't think the NFL has ever looked worse, but at the same time, I'm not of the mindset that Roger Goodell's career should be in jeopardy, and here is why. It is unpopular to take this position, but it is what it is. Here's the reality. Even though this is not just about business as usual, because we understand how heinous this is, you also have to take into account a couple of things Roger Goodell had to take into consideration. You're the commissioner of the league. You're worried about the league's name being sullied, although some people would say in this world that we live in, you can't be concerned about that. Of course he's going to be concerned about that. He's the commissioner. It's one thing if Janae Palmer at the time, was going to raise holy hell, press charges, and do all of this other stuff, then it's unavoidable. But if during your investigation you reach the conclusion that clearly her and her now husband is working things out, he's recognized the errors of his ways, and as a result, we're going to move in this different direction, I think it definitely should have been more than 2 games. Some would say it should have been, obviously, now that we've seen the video, it should be incredibly severe. Yeah. We also know the NFL should have seen the video. But let's not put our blinders on and act like in the world of big business, where you believe that something can emphatically and profoundly, affect your bottom line,
right,
that it's not going to give you cause to pause.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't give me cause to pause. It doesn't give you cause to pause because we ain't the commissioner. We don't answer to 32 NFL owners. And we're not worried about the bottom line of the business. I don't think the NFL should be either with all the billions that they make. But when you've reached the point, or in my mind, having regressed to a point where you're actually charging artists to perform on Super Bowl weekend as opposed to paying them, everything about you appears to be a money grab. So if you're that fixated on the bottom line, then the likelihood is that anything that potentially compromises the bottom line is something that you're going to be sensitive to. I'm not saying that's how Roger Goodell felt. I don't know. I haven't spoken to the man. We haven't heard from the man. He's the one that needs to be doing some interviews in this today, tomorrow, or etc. But it stands to reason. It makes sense as to why you could find this heinous, but at the same time, just try to get past it as quietly as you possibly can so it doesn't bring this kind of negative attention on that three-letter brand just so protective.
Okay, just a quick point of order on the Janae point that you made. Remember, as we've all learned, if we should have known this already, many victims in the past of domestic violence have stood by their men for the wrong reason.
Last hour, Skip. It's on USA Today right now.
Yeah,
we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Okay, but just for the record, and in this case, Roger Goodell has one thing to fall back on, and that is the law, because he can always say, to defend himself and his job, that, well, our court of law already ruled that Ray Rice deserves no more than anger management training. They let him off with anger management. Right. And point of order, by all reports, the prosecutor and the presiding judge saw the video that we just showed. And you let him off? Our legal system let off Ray? Are you kidding me?
Hasn't Goodell always kind of treated things separately from what the law did?
And that's
sometimes he's waited to follow, follow suit, and he can easily mirror their punishment by saying, well, gee, this to me would then only be 2 games.
But, Skip, that's where Goodell loses. Because Goodell loses from the perspective is that he has not always waited for a ruling to be handed down by the legal system. He has been on the record, in writing as well as verbally, saying that the best interest of the league it matters here, and I'm not going to wait. And in Ben Roethlisberger's case, he didn't wait, along with a few others as well. I'm not sure, if I recall correctly, Adam Pac-Man Jones, but I'm not sure about that. The point that I'm trying to make to you is that, definitively speaking, it is clear that he hasn't always felt the need to wait for the legal system to take to take action before he's taken action. So that argument doesn't hold weight here.
Okay, but it did give him, if he needs it, an excuse in this case to say, well, gee, I just followed suit of our legal system here, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay, if it comes down to push or shove whether he's going to keep his job, and trust me, if Roger Goodell were the president of a lot of other companies in this country, he would have just lost his job.
Well, but I will say this. He made a mistake. He made a bad decision. He dropped the ball. But by and large, when you consider the agenda that Roger Goodell has had, the crusade that he has been on in terms of cleaning up the sport in a bevy of ways, regardless of how egregious this may appear, considering his position and his body of work, I do not believe that Roger Goodell's job should be in jeopardy. He made a mistake. He dropped the ball, plain and simple.
Did you love the way he handled Spygate? Remember that? The missing tapes? Do you remember how they disappeared? I'm not so sure about that one. Did you love the way he handled Bountygate?
I didn't love the way he's handled several situations, but I also like the way he handled many others. He's not perfect. We understand that.
Did you like the Riley Cooper situation?
Well, listen, to me personally, I look at the Riley Cooper situation. Again, I don't want to divert too far away from where we're going, but you and I disagreed on the whole Riley Cooper situation. You thought he should have been banned from the league for at least a year. You thought he should have been suspended.
I just thought the Eagles should have gotten rid of him.
They thought the Eagles should have got rid of him. I thought otherwise. I thought otherwise. You sitting there, you inebriated at a country music concert, you spew some racial epithets. I didn't like it. I was ticked off about it like other black folks were. But the man apologized. If the man apologized, give somebody a chance to make amends. People make mistakes.
Okay.
All right, so let's go back to Ray Rice, who is terminated from the Ravens. He's also suspended by the league indefinitely. Moving forward, should he ever play again in the NFL?
Yes, he should. Okay? And I understand that on a day like today, it's real easy to pile on. It's real easy to jump on the bandwagon. You have a lot of women out there who are right to feel the way that they feel when they say he should never play again. We understand that because women who are victims of domestic violence have a heightened level of sensitivity that somebody like myself who's never been involved in domestic violence other than me putting my hands on men who have domestically abused a woman. I mean, I can't harbor the same level of sensitivity that they do. But as pundits, as commentators, as journalists, as people, in a position that we're in to disseminate messages over the airwaves, how as proud as I am of Michael Vick, how am I going to look at a guy that spent 18 months in a federal penitentiary for the whole dogfighting scandal, think he should be in the league? Dante Stallworth, was driving under the influence and ultimately killed somebody in the morning, but, the person was walking towards the highway, I believe it was, in Miami.
Yep.
But that person died. Leonard Little, the same thing, behind a vehicle,
Yep.
ultimately killed somebody. But they were back into the league. There are people that have been responsible, albeit not intentionally. There are people who have been responsible for the deaths of other human beings that have been allowed back in the NFL.
Yep.
How am I going to sit there and say that Ray Rice doesn't deserve to be a Ray Rice? Now, you got a lot of people out there that's speculating, well, he must have done this before, he'll do it again. What? All we know about is this one incident. Before then, what we were told and what the facts showed was that Ray Rice had been a model citizen. Now, that's not to defend him because, again, what we saw on video is egregious. It cannot be defended. I mean, he deserves to be out for the year as far as I'm concerned. He should be ashamed to show his face, to be quite honest with you. But the point is that at some point in time, this dude is 27 years old. What are we supposed to do? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I keep telling you, Skip, and I mean this not just in terms of, speaking monetarily, but I'm a capitalist, man. And I think along the lines of, if you're not out there earning an honest living, your problems become our problems as a society because we ain't going to just leave you on the street and not try to take care of you. And so as a result of that, if you are in a position where you have an opportunity to resurrect yourself, to really rehabilitate yourself, then that's the way it should be. If we're going to feel that way about Ray Rice, then think about what you're saying about people who end up in jail for whatever reason. If the justice system is going to let you out and allow you to revisit society, if we're finished with them too, then why are we letting them out? Because they're going to be our problems. Because, again, how are they going to earn a living? I think these are things that we need to be sensitive to. And I think in the case of Ray Rice, he made an incredible mistake. He is going to pay for it. He's paying for it right now.
Yep.
He deserves to pay for it. But to look at him as a finished product, like somebody who never, ever, ever deserves to play in the NFL again, what I would ask people is to do your homework and look at some of the dudes that have been allowed back in the league and then come back and talk to me.
That's fair. I'm with you. I do not believe that Ray Rice should be banned for life. However, I think he might have effectively been banned for life.
27,
yeah. So let's look at this. He definitely should be gone for this year. And then I'm glad you brought up Michael Vick, because if you didn't, I was going to. Then, obviously, we would need, and the league would need, for Ray Rice to demonstrate that he has undergone successful counseling, which I don't believe he has to this point, even though he said, and remember, I made a stand, I'm not sure you're here for the show, but I made a stand the day after that open session, the first open media session they did with the teammates ringing around the media.
Yeah, I remember.
Now, I made a strong case. I'm not buying what he's saying. A lot of people bought it. Oh, he's contrite, he's sincere. I didn't buy it because I didn't like what he was saying about what he was going to do about it. What about your counseling? What about, will you become an advocate, a speaker against domestic violence? Will you tour the league and talk to other players about it? I wanted to hear all those things from Ray, and I heard none of that from him. And, of course, he wouldn't talk about what happened inside the elevator in that session, which I thought was significant. So, to me, until I hear some of that and see some of that, and he demonstrates it to the league, he can't even be considered for reinstatement. But here's the football issue and the reality of this. By the time he is allowed to play, he'll be 28 years of age, at a position that historically has had the shortest lifespan in the league, running back, right?
He's averaged 3 yards a carry. Wasn't that impressive last year?
Well, he went from 2011, when he had a combined yards of 2,068 running and receiving, to last year they fell to 981. He got banged up in the preseason game at Dallas. Are you sure, Stephen A. Smith, that anybody would take a chance on Ray Rice? Has he become more trouble than he is worth going forward? Because
listen.
You just say, hey, is he really that good? We're not talking about Adrian Peterson.
To answer the question here, I was down on Ray Rice because of his game.
Okay.
I thought, there was games last year where he averaged 2 yards a carry. He was pathetic.
Okay.
I'm like, take all of this out of the equation. As a football player, he didn't seem as if he would be missed. Okay? So when you add this to the mix, the question is he worth the trouble? Clearly, to the Baltimore Ravens, he wasn't. But at the same time, again, when you talk about whether or not he should be allowed back into the league, let's watch and monitor things from the perspective. I'm not talking about being all in their business, because I think Janae Palmer-Rice has a point where, they're married. It's their personal business. Now, it happened in a public setting, which is on video, which means that she needs to be careful about the level of sensitivity that she's showing in terms of, spewing her vitriol at the media and the public at large for judging. Well, it's just that it happened in a public place. That's how we all know about it. Okay, so
with her husband.
With her husband. So we understand it from that perspective.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think we need to be careful about wanting to close the book, wanting to close the door on a 27-year-old, not just because he's 27, not just because this was a heinous mistake and he's going to pay for it, but what she's saying is that he ain't the only one paying for it.
Yep.
It's all of them. She's paying for it. Their family is paying for it. And so when we look at it from that perspective, I'm saying that can't matter now as it pertains to the punishment that Ray Rice has to deal with. But as it pertains to the future, in terms of closing the book, there's a whole bunch of people. Now, certainly not mistakes this heinous. Some worse than this, most considerably less than this. But 27-year-olds make mistakes a lot.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, I would hope that he would rehabilitate himself, deal with it, and then have an opportunity to resurrect his life. Let's be careful about closing a book on a 27-year-old.
All right, we'll discuss this more further. Let's go to what we were talking about earlier. Stephen A., you alluded to it. Janae Rice posting this morning on Instagram, quote, I woke up this morning feeling like I had a horrible nightmare, feeling like I'm mourning the death of my closest friend. But to have to accept the fact that it's reality is a nightmare itself. No one knows the pain that the media and unwanted from the public has caused my family. To make us relive a moment in our lives that we regret every day is a horrible thing. To take something away from the man I love that he's worked very hard for all his life just to gain ratings is horrific. This is our life. What don't you all get? If your intentions were to hurt us, embarrass us, make us feel alone, take all happiness away, you've succeeded on so many levels. Just know you've succeeded on so many levels. Just know we will continue to grow and show the world what real love is. Ravens Nation, we love you. And by the way, we also want to add the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-SAFE. In a matter of months, we have a second NBA franchise in the spotlight for racist remarks. Earlier this summer, Hawks general manager Danny Ferry, on a conference call with management and ownership, read a scouting report about free agent Luol Deng using insensitive and racist remarks. Here's a portion of those remarks. Quote, he has a little African in him. Not in a bad way, but he's a guy who would have a nice store out front but sell you counterfeit stuff out of the back. End quote. That prompted an internal investigation exposing an email from 2 years ago by co-owner Bruce Levinson, who also used insensitive racist remarks. Levinson has since said he will sell his controlling interest. Another co-owner, Michael Guerin, according to WSB TV, is calling for Ferry's firing. Ferry issued this statement, quote, in regards to the insensitive remarks that were used during our due diligence process, I was repeating comments that were gathered from numerous sources during background conversations and scouting about different players. I repeated those comments during a telephone conversation reviewing the draft and free agency process. Those words do not reflect my views or words that I would use to describe an individual, and I certainly regret it. I apologize to those I offended and to Luol, who I reached out to Monday morning. All right, gentlemen, how should the Hawks and or the NBA handle this situation?
Skip Bayless, the NBA should do absolutely nothing to Danny Ferry. The Atlanta Hawks should let him go. Danny Ferry shouldn't be gone as the general manager for the Atlanta Hawks for being a racist. He's not. Danny Ferry should be gone because after Levinson leaves, the rest of the owners don't necessarily want him. Now, I'm not speaking for all of them, but I've been up half the night, Skip, because I've spoken to about 15 different people, from owners in the league to GMs to coaches to players, both present and some former, all of whom know, are familiar with, or have a relationship with Danny Ferry. Here's the bottom line. Danny Ferry came to Atlanta on a mission not just to win basketball games, but to facilitate its transition in Atlanta by having a culture change, okay? You talk about black attendance, you talk about the 90% percentage occupancy of African Americans in the clubs, the crowd, 70% black, no black cheerleaders, all of this other stuff that's going on. People are looking at some of the culture changes that he was trying to make. They look at folks who happen to be black that were made uncomfortable or let go or what have you, friends of those individuals, bosses of those individuals, et cetera, along with some of the stuff that Danny Ainge said that has now been revealed. And they're looking at that. Danny Ferry, I'm sorry. Danny Ferry said that. And they're looking at it now to sort of to label him a racist. All right? Somebody that isn't too fond of black folks or anything like this. Skip, I know folks in San Antonio, they love San Antonio. They love Danny Ferry.
Sure.
Including Tim Duncan and those guys. Have no problem with them.
Well, he was on the staff.
I remember somebody said to me, LeBron James and his crew had a problem with Danny Ferry when they were in Cleveland. I called them last night. They said that emphatically that is not true. They have no problem with Danny Ferry. They don't know what the hell anybody's talking about. I called Billy King, my friend who I've known, who's the general manager in Brooklyn, used to be the general manager in Philadelphia.
Ice Bucket Challenge.
You understand what I'm saying? The Ice Bucket Challenge. I've known Billy King for, close to 15 years. Billy King asked me to quote him on this. He's known Danny Ferry since they were 15 years old. It's one of his best friends in the world.
Well, they played
Danny
together.
Ferry both played at Duke. Danny Ferry was in his wedding. You understand? They're that tight.
All right.
I spoke to former players in Cleveland. They said, look, we've heard some people that were employees that said some stuff about him. We ain't had that problem with him. We don't know that. You may not like some of the decisions that he makes or whatever the case may be, but this stuff about him being a racist is wrong. So, based on the preponderance of evidence that I've accumulated, combined with my personal relationship with Danny Ferry, which is not, I don't know him that well, all right? We're not friends or anything like that. But I've always found him to be a very fair-minded individual, and I don't notice those problems. I'm not saying there are not a few people out there that have said that about him, but by and large, the black people that I know, who know him, played for him, worked with him, worked over him, etc., they said this is not true. So now we get to Atlanta. Why should he be gone? That's because Levinson, who has majority control, who has control of operations, has majority stake in ownership, he's the only guy that really wanted Danny Ferry and forced others to capitulate. And clearly with him being gone, people are looking at Danny Ferry and they're saying he needs to be gone. He read that email. According to my sources, Danny Ferry said, look, I messed up bad. I should have never read the scouting report. I should have never read the scouting report about Luol Deng when it's talking about he's an African and bringing in the storefront. The store looks good, but the back is a counterfeit shop and all of this other stuff. Sort of, they felt that was highly racially insensitive. Danny Ferry acknowledges he was wrong to read that, and he was wrong to read off that scouting report. Where the discrepancy comes in is that there are those in Atlanta who are saying it's not a scouting report. It was him saying it on his own as opposed to him reading a scouting report. And that's where the discrepancy begins. In the end, what it comes down to is that if Levinson is gone, it appears that they don't want Danny either.
Okay.
So if you're not someplace where you're wanted, you signed a 6-year, $18 million deal. You got 4 years left at $12 million. Work out a buyout, be gone, because clearly you don't need to be working in the city of Atlanta where this stuff has been put out about you, because even though my sources by and large tell me it's incredibly and completely inaccurate in terms of the racist part, it is 54% black. You do have a strong African-American.
What's 54%?
The population, African-American population in the city.
Yep.
The fan base is largely African-American.
Yep.
And the African-American folks in Atlanta that I know, all they need to do is hear something like this to turn against you. And I don't know how Danny can come back from that.
Yep.
But let's be clear. He should go because he's not wanted there once Levinson leaves. He shouldn't be gone because he's a racist, because factually speaking, that's incorrect from what we all know. And it's a shame that his reputation has taken this kind of hit. No matter how you feel about Danny Ferry, I can't say he deserves what's happening to him.
So I think you're heading toward he will get another job in this league.
I think that he should. If he loses his job, I mean, listen, Atlanta made the playoffs last year. Budenholzer has shown he can coach.
Yep.
You know, clearly some of the moves that he's made on the personnel level didn't ingratiate himself with some folks in Atlanta, some folks who are well connected in Atlanta, and that may be where Danny Ferry made his mistake, because Levinson didn't just hire him to be in control of basketball operations, but he included him in everything, all that stuff about the merchandising sales, the attendance, all of that stuff that Danny Ferry should have had nothing to do with, because he's there for basketball operations. So by assisting Levinson in his thought process and making these decisions, they're going to connect two pieces apart, and as a result, they're going to want Danny Ferry out there too. You don't need to be in Atlanta.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean you don't deserve to be a general manager somewhere else.
Okay. A couple of quick ironies I see. Number one, Danny Ferry played at Duke. Luol Deng played at Duke, just for the record. People I know around the league have always, to me, characterized Luol Deng as an extremely hard worker and a good guy who did just last year win the J. Walter Kennedy Citizenship Award. Just for the record.
Yes.
Okay. Now back to walk me through how this happened. Danny Ferry, as the GM, is on a conference call with a whole bunch of owners.
June 6th.
Okay. And he's on this conference call because they have so many minority owners, meaning a whole lot of owners, where other situations...
4 different offices in 3 different cities.
That's what I'm saying.
New York, Atlanta, and D.C.
Okay, this is crazy because most cities, let's take the San Antonio Spurs, you don't need a conference call because there's just one guy who owns the basketball team, right? And so, yeah, and half the time he's like, hey, you guys, you just do what you're going to do with the basketball. He doesn't need to be kept completely up to date about who you might or might not draft. But in this case, all the minority owners, everybody in the conference call wants to hear, which way are you leaning? What are you thinking? So he's going through and he's reading off the scouting report. Am I right? And it was...
That's what he says.
That's what he says. Was it constructed by someone? I'm reading in USA Today this morning said that it was somebody outside the organization. Is that right?
Yes, it was another team that gave a scouting report on Luol Deng. Danny Ferry, according to my sources, is saying that the NBA League office knows for a fact that he indeed was quoting a scout, even though there's no proof that that is correct. I haven't spoken to the NBA office this morning.
The scout was not employed by the Atlanta Hawks?
No, it was
like an independent
somebody else
report?
because remember, Luol Deng was a free agent and the Atlanta Hawks were considering him. Okay.
So if that's true, then how guilty should Danny Ferry be for simply reading it over the conference call? He didn't read it publicly. He read it to his owners. Okay, I'm just trying to get this straight.
I agree.
What do you think?
Well, listen, I'm saying Danny Ferry is on the record acknowledging that he made a mistake, that he shouldn't have read something so incendiary.
Yep.
All right? But is that a fireable offense to read something that somebody else wrote? I can't say that. I can't say that.
If we're going to take to the bank that it was something that somebody else...
If we're going to say take to the bank that it's something somebody else wrote and not something he was saying off of his own tongue.
Okay. Then I'm with you on the conclusion. Just because of his association with that comment, which is very incendiary.
Yep.
It's completely...
Towards Luol Deng?
Yeah. Or
so.
In the city of Atlanta, as you point out.
That's right.
A lot of black folks are going to say, hey, that's enough. Like that, game over on that one,
and
right?
That's exactly why I'm saying that Danny Ferry needs to go. He needs to go because the city of Atlanta, based on this shrapnel of criticism and the momentum that this story has built, they're not going to let that go in Atlanta as it pertains to him. But I think it's important to recognize that some of this may be incredibly unfair to Danny Ferry, because it's one thing for us to sit here and say, you know something, you can't read that email. That's a problem. You got other members in your ownership group sending letters to Levinson saying that, you know, we need to investigate this. And then I heard that Levinson, along with the general counsel, went to Danny Ferry and gave him a heads up that an investigation was forthcoming. So it's a whole bunch of stuff that's being thrown out there. Well, I don't know what's accurate, what's inaccurate. I know what's being said. In the end, what we do know is that you don't have any preponderance of evidence that shows that Danny Ferry is a racist. And if that is the case, what has been put out there about him borders on cruelty, to be quite honest with you. But that doesn't mean he should keep his job, because he made a mistake, and that's alienated some folks in Atlanta. And you may need to move on.
I'm with you on that. But I do find it significant that Adam Silver, very sensitive to these issues,
yes, he is,
says he will take no action in this case.
Well, I find that very significant as well, because Adam Silver obviously is conscientious. We're very proud of him as the commissioner thus far. And if there was an action that needed to be taken, I'm sure that he would take it. But in the end, what it comes down to is that Levinson is gone. That was Danny Ferry's man.
There you go.
Therefore, if your man is gone, you need to go with them and get a job somewhere else where you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff.
Distance yourself from Atlanta.
That's what he needs to do. He doesn't deserve to be fired because of the job that he's done with the Atlanta Hawks, because he's just getting started, and it hasn't been that bad.
Our defense was playing outstanding tonight. You know, they were getting us the ball back, stopping New York. So I know if we just played smart, still aggressive, no question. You know, making some big plays, throwing the ball down the field, but we played smart tonight, and you know, with how our defense was playing, that was going to be a recipe for success.
We could have definitely performed better than we did tonight, and we could have. You know, there's no reason for the turnovers. That's not part of the offense, and you know, no reason to have those too. But and besides that, there's, you know, a couple other opportunities to make some plays we just didn't make.
New offensive coordinator, same Eli Manning. 2 interceptions. Lions dominate on Monday Night Football. Calvin Johnson, 7 catches, 164 yards, 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. Lions open up a 14-0 lead and hold on 35-14. All right, guys, was this more about good Lions performance or bad Giants performance?
Skip Bayless, the Lions are good because they have Megatron. And Stafford can throw the football. Reggie Bush can catch the football out of the backfield. We know they've got some weapons. They've got a lot of size at their wide receiver spot as well. They can throw it up and get that. We understand that. Defensively, they're not stellar, but they're solid. But this was about the New York Giants and how awful and pathetic and putrid they are. I am a fan of Jerry Reese, the GM for the New York Giants. I am worried about his job. 4 times in the last 5 years, the New York Giants have missed the playoffs. You know, they've got a Super Bowl. They've got 2 Super Bowls since 2007. The rest of the years, they don't make the playoffs, excluding 1, I believe. When I look at it from that perspective, and I see the level of talent or lack thereof that's on that field, I have to look at the general manager. I know that Tom Coughlin can coach. I know that he's arguably a Hall of Famer with 2 Super Bowl rings. I know that he's a workhorse, that the work ethic that he has, the health, you know, the vibrancy, the passion is unrivaled as far as I'm concerned. And at his age, I think it's absolutely remarkable. But if I think that there also needs to be some looking into Tom Coughlin, it's simply for the reason that sometimes there's a new voice and a new face that's needed.
Yep.
Regardless of how productive and competent and gifted you may be, certain times an organization, the players, a city needs a different face and a different voice. And I'm starting to get that feel for the New York Giants. I'm also looking at Eli Manning. He's regressing. He's still pouting when he makes mistakes. He's still pouting when things don't go his way. He's the consummate professional, very, very good guy. I'm fond of him as a person. Clearly not in his brother's class. And all around you, they have no running game. Their passing game is suspect. Their offense seems out of sync. It puts more pressure on the defense. They're just not a good football team. I could be wrong, but they started off 0-6 last year for a reason. And to me, it wouldn't surprise me at all if they started out almost as bad this year. They're just not a good football team, it appears. I think the Giants would be lucky to win 5 games.
That could win the NFC East, by the way. Right?
I doubt it.
Something we'll discuss.
Now with the Eagles in there.
We will discuss that later. Stephen A. Smith, I got to defend your New York Football Giants in one area. I think defensively they're not bad. They got some players on defense, JPP and Beeson, and then that secondary, DRC and Antrell Roll and Prince. Those are some pretty good players back there.
I'm not trying to say they're bad. I'm trying to say the offense is so bad it puts more pressure on them. And you can only do but so much. I know the defense is respectable.
It's respectable, which is why, to answer Doug's original question, I'm going to go that it was more about explosive Lions than awful or putrid, to use your word, Giants. Because the Detroit Lions put up 417 yards on that defense. I'm impressed because I think we were both impressed going into the year. We both said Detroit will make the playoffs as a wild card team out of that division that we both picked Green Bay to win.
Yeah.
Their offense is going to roll up points on everybody they play this year. Everybody. And unless they self-destruct, which they have that gene in them, that self-destruction gene in them. They seem to.
Golden Tate,
that
nice
helps.
Acquisition.
Yeah, it's nice. Defensively, they are ordinary at best to me, the Lions. So on the flip side of the coin, we're back to Eli. 3 times now he has led the National Football League in interceptions, which is mind-boggling to me. But the first 2 times, he got away with it because he came right back the next year after leading the league in interceptions and led the Giants on some improbable, if not lucky, Super Bowl roll. Twice after leading the league in interceptions, they went and won the Super Bowl over the New England Patriots. How? We can debate how many times he closed his eyes and threw it, but that's okay. The point is that I kept telling you, how many years can he do that? Well, now what is he, 34, coming off ankle surgery? It ain't happening this time because that looked like last year's Eli. That looked like, and we happened to be on the phone at a moment last night, we were chatting, when Eli threw his second interception, and I said, that looked like Romo, right? I mean, that's how bad it looked like Romo on Sunday with his 3 interceptions in the first quarter and a half of that game at Jerry World. So if Eli has gone south for whatever reason, he's just sort of forgetting how to play quarterback. He's just in a slump. He was just a little off much of the night. Even the passes he completed last night, I'd say, how did he get that in that crack? Like there are 4 defensive hands and it somehow gets to the tight end. I don't know where the tight end that Donnell even came from, Grambling. You know, like, okay, is that what you're down to that? Really?
Isn't the new offensive coordinator supposed to solve this stuff?
You know what? It's bad. McAdoo hasn't looked impressive thus far. They despite them being I've never seen a team undefeated in preseason.
Yeah, that's right.
That got so much criticism because of how they looked en route to being undefeated in preseason. The Giants were 5-0 in the preseason, and you looked at them and said, my God, they're awful.
Because
Literally.
their scrubs beat the other scrubs in the second half. Right. I mean, that's really what it boiled down to.
You just looked at them. No continuity, no cohesion whatsoever. It's a problem. It's a problem. And listen, the defense can make things happen and the defense can make things interesting. But whatever they're doing in installing a more up-tempo West Coast style of offense in New York City, it doesn't appear to be working for the New York Giants. It really, really doesn't. And they've got to fix it quick because the defense is respectable.
It's respectable.
And if the offense could do anything, I think the Giants will have a shot at winning the division. The problem is, you have no reason to have any faith in the New York Giants offense based on what you've seen the preseason and last night's game.
Okay. Bottom line, what one player loomed above both games last night?
To me,
Megatron. Okay. Can you defend your New York Football Giants decision? I don't know if it came from Coughlin or the defensive staff to mostly single cover Calvin Johnson during that football game. Can you defend it? No, you can't. Although my Dallas Cowboys attempted it last year at Detroit. Remember that? They said, oh, Brandon Carr can slow him down, keep him to a low roar. And Megatron goes last year for 329
that was after they
on Brandon
Carr.
To him. What's that?
Remember, that was after they talked smack. Who talked smack before that game when Megatron went off? Because he went off that game.
Dez did.
Dez did.
Thank you.
Dez. Yeah, the Megatron went ballistic.
Okay, so last night, DRC, for the most part, tried to take him solo. and he went for 7 catches, 164 yards. And it felt like that Stafford could just throw it to him anytime he really needed a big gain. He could just say, I'll just throw it over there, and he'll go get it, which he does. I've never seen anything like it. There's like Dez. I love Dez. Dez is not in this man's league, man. This is big time.
Nobody is in Megatron's league. Oof. Megatron is on another level. It's just that simple. It's just that simple.
So could he win the MVP this year?
Well, listen, the point is that depends on Stafford.
Okay, we're going to discuss that later. Yes, sir.
Professional tease right there, Skip. I'm impressed.
I know our commissioner has taken some heat, and I just want to say that I spoke with him yesterday when this came out, not knowing what was going to happen and knowing I was coming in here. And he had no knowledge of this video. And, you know, the way he's handled this situation himself, coming out with the mea culpa in his statement a couple of weeks ago, or 10 days ago, and setting a very clear policy how we conduct ourselves in the NFL, I thought was excellent. And anyone who's second-guessing that doesn't know him.
That was Patriots owner Robert Kraft on CBS This Morning earlier today, defending how Commissioner Roger Goodell has handled the Ray Rice case. Now, this video released yesterday by TMZ shows Rice striking his then-fiancée, Janae Palmer, in an Atlantic City casino elevator. TMZ has since said the NFL never asked for this video. All right, on that note, we welcome you back to First Take. All right, we welcome in 6-time Pro Bowler Eric Allen joining us now. And, EA, should Roger Goodell's job be in jeopardy?
Of course it should. He's not Teflon Don or anybody. I mean, he does a job, and that job can be critiqued and criticized depending on the results, basically. And the results of this investigation or whatever we want to call it was dropped. It was a huge fumble, no matter how you call it. I think the moral compass in all of us kind of, took a step back when you have a guy getting 2 games, and then on the other end, Josh, gets a whole year. And
Josh Gordon.
Josh Gordon gets a whole year. So right from the start, I think all of us, that moral compass inside of us said something's a little off here. You're not sure what. And then the video comes out, and everyone is appalled at what we've seen. And for the people on the front lines, I think, who deal with this daily, understand as soon as they hear the word domestic violence, that ugliness and that violence comes up. But most of us who are not on the front lines, there was always that gray area. What really happened in the elevator? It's always a gray area. Now, unfortunately, for the league and Ray Rice, we have a face to put on domestic violence. Domestic violence will never be looked at the same because of Ray. And fortunately for the women that come after this, they'll have, no questions about the violence, and everyone will have a great understanding. So there's no doubt Roger Goodell should be critiqued and criticized in this manner. I mean, he's no different than any other man who has a job of extreme importance. The league is important. It sets the foundation for a lot of things that we look at as society, and that's wrong. The league has to set that precedent at times. But, again, and then you have to wonder, I mean, the league has so much power. It's very hard, I think, for any of us to really believe that they didn't have access, knowledge, capability to be able to find out what happened inside the elevator. I know a couple things. I know when you go to a casino, there's a lot of money around, right? Just like a bank. When you walk in, you're going to be under surveillance. And I think everyone knows that. And for the league not to, hey, you know what happened inside the elevator? We saw on the outside, and that was ugly, but what happened inside the elevator? And for them not to have knowledge of that, and I don't know, but it's just hard for me. I've been around the league a long time. Played in 14 and been out almost 12 and been here. So, I've been around the game for 20-plus years. And it's just hard for me to believe the league couldn't have accessed that video.
I respectfully disagree with your position on Roger Goodell. I do not believe his job should be in jeopardy, and I think that point was augmented by looking at the footage of Robert Kraft, the owner for the New England Patriots, who I have profound respect for and who is one of Roger Goodell's bosses. Nobody is trying to say that Roger Goodell did not make an egregious error. that he did not have an egregious lapse in judgment. But when we are talking about this man's career, presiding as commissioner over a multi-billion dollar conglomerate that is the NFL, knowing that he has 32 NFL owners to answer to, okay, he dropped the ball. He fessed up. He acknowledged he dropped the ball. If you're the domestic violence community, Roger Goodell, for the first time, instituted rules that called for a 6-game banishment for a first-time offender and a lifetime ban for a second-time offender. That wasn't on the books. Now, so we understand, and when it happened, we all applauded, albeit a bit delayed. It should have been sooner. We did applaud when he came down with that new rule, okay? So now we go back to Ray Rice and what exactly transpired. You just pointed out, those who are on the front line understand and know what time it is. Yeah. Everybody else, it's a gray area. Well, who's on the front line? It's the villain, it's the victim. Present, past. Those who have dealt with it, those who are dealing with it. They are the front line. Everybody else is gray. Because you find yourself, let me explain. You find yourself asking this question. Just like I said, I'm on a radio show yesterday, my new radio show, Sirius XM Mad Dog Sports Radio. I'm talking about this. And somebody's going off. Well, you knew what happened. What did you need the video to see for? Well, it's simple. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, how much is a video worth? I agree. Don't tell me that you felt exactly the same when you saw the video as you did before you saw the video. You can read about somebody getting hit, but when you see a woman get hit with a left hook, head snap, drops, head hits the railing, she collapses, she's unconscious, laid out, and you see her dragged out of an elevator, I don't care what you read. The impact of that video is very profound. It's the reason you got two eyes. Exactly. Because it has that kind of effect. So, again, for me, if we're talking about how Roger Goodell should have got a hold of that video, I'm with you. I don't believe for once. I find it very difficult to believe that they couldn't get a hold of that video. But assuming he didn't see it, for whatever reason, to me it would be far worse if he saw the video and came with the ruling. Even though the ruling should have been stiffer to begin with, if he saw the ruling and if he saw the video and made that ruling, it's incredibly egregious. So for me, I just look at him. Roger Goodell is taking hits. He deserves the hit. He deserves to be criticized. He deserves to be excoriated. The owner should look at him and say, what the hell's wrong with you? Why didn't you do X, Y, and Z? Even if you wanted to tell me there should be some kind of reprimand for Roger Goodell, I get it. But the cumulative effect of his body of work, I think, outweighs one mistake, as egregious as this mistake may have been.
Okay. Before I proceed, I have to take exception with one thing that Robert Kraft said on CBS this morning. Okay. He said, and I quote, and again, we can parse this, maybe he meant something else, but he said that Roger Goodell had no knowledge of this video. No knowledge of this video? You mean you didn't even know the second video existed? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? TMZ was able to acquire both videos, but the National Football League was unable? I'm back to what I told you at the top of this show. The commissioner did not drop the ball. He chose never to pick the ball up. The commissioner operated, and all the decision makers in this league, and I'm sure some of the owners were involved in these decisions. It's what I would call, the cliche phrase is plausible deniability, but it's willful negligence. It's premeditated negligence where you just say, you know what? Let's just steer clear of these. Let's choose not to get involved in these domestic violence disputes between our players and their wives or fiancés or girlfriends, because that's private. Let's just leave that over there. They can figure that out, or the legal system will figure it out. And again, I'm with you that this man's job should be in jeopardy, and I'm going to say it again. If he ran any other big company in this country, I'm pretty sure he would be gone over this one. Again, was it solely his call how to operate here? Did he get some help from a Robert Kraft or a Jerry Jones? I don't know, but maybe there are a lot of decision makers who went into who contributed to this decision. But in the big picture, I think they can fall back on the legal system. The law's on their side because they can just say, well, wait a second, the prosecutor in this case and the presiding judge did get to see the inside the elevator video. That's by all accounts, okay? And they chose to punish Ray Rice with anger management? That's all he got was anger management?
And okay. I understand, and I agree with you, Skip. Two things. I think when I'm talking about the front line, outside of the two people who are involved, I'm talking about the police officers, I'm talking about the people who deal with domestic violence on a daily basis, as far as it taking so they understand that too. Got it. And we're just not there. Those of us who are not on the front line, they're just not there yet until yesterday. But now we understand it. And the second thing, the league needs to do a better job of having a female in situations like this.
Totally. Totally agree.
I think if you have a female involved from the beginning, I don't think the 2 games is even an issue. I think it's far worse.
No question.
We're not in this situation.
Hold on. No question, you're right. But getting back to your first point, those law enforcement officials and others, that's not Roger Goodell. So all I was trying to say is that Roger Goodell wouldn't qualify as somebody that's on the front lines.
Yeah, I agree.
That's number one. Number two, let's be careful here, because I understand I'm not going to lose any sleep if Roger Goodell loses his job when he's pocketing $29 million a year as the commissioner, or $40 million a year. I think he'll be fine.
2 years ago, he made $44 million.
$44 million. So I'm like,
thank you.
I'm not going to cry a river about Roger Goodell losing. I think he's going to be just fine. But from an aesthetic perspective, let's understand what we're saying here. We're almost treating Roger Goodell like he Ray Rice. I know that feeling. Ray Rice is the one that hit Janae Palmer. Ray Rice is the one that committed domestic violence. Roger Goodell dropped the ball. Roger Goodell made amends by correcting himself with the policy, and then yesterday when the video came out, by indefinitely suspending Ray Rice. Roger Goodell, following the Baltimore Ravens who cut him. Roger Goodell made a mistake. He's being raked through the coals, deservedly so. It'll probably be revisited. Maybe there should be some kind of reprimand involved as it pertains to Roger Goodell. But when you talk about him losing his job, you're talking about a punishment that's tantamount to the dude that actually committed domestic violence. Now, I'm going to say this again. As unpopular as it is, damn it, I'm saying it. I was going off the air for a week with folks throughout this country talking about me like I hit somebody. I made the mistake. I misspoke. That is what I did. I should have used a different choice of words. I had to pay a price for that. I support the company with its decision because I have an obligation to articulate myself properly and clearly and cogently. I get that. I own that. But the reason why I never shy about bringing this up is because when I walk the street, these ignorant folks on Twitter, some folks walking the street, I'm so proud of the lovely women out there, black, white, Hispanic, people coming up to me from all over the country saying, number one, we understood what you meant, but number two, and more importantly, we know that you wasn't sitting there condoning a man putting his hands on a woman, because I've never put my hands on a woman and never would. How in God's name are others had the audacity to try and treat me like I'm Ray Rice? Why are we talking about Roger Goodell like he's Ray Rice? Roger Goodell, to lose his job is tantamount to him suffering the same punishment as Ray Rice. He did not hit anybody. He did not put his hands on anybody.
But it appears he condoned it.
Wait a minute.
To the tune of only a 2-game suspension.
Time out. But see, and that's the part we can't talk about, because Roger Goodell, through the investigation, listen, we just went into the wife of Ray Rice making her case for her husband. Now, that's a different subject we ain't getting into. Right. And we don't need to get into that because we ain't qualified to discuss that, okay? But the point is, if she's saying it to us on this day, could you imagine what she said to Roger Goodell in a plea for her husband? And if you're not on the front lines and you're not an expert and you're not qualified to gauge the issue of domestic violence and its collateral impact, okay, and you don't have a woman working with you to really gauge what this is about, and you haven't worked with experts beforehand, you waited until your judgment came down, then to get their counsel, you may not have known. And if you don't know, you made a mistake. And if you made a mistake, yes, you should be criticized. Yes, you should be called to the carpet. Yes, you should even be excoriated. But to lose his career because he made a mistake in judgment in terms of a call, tantamount to Ray Rice, who actually hit the woman? Where's the perspective, America? How can you look at a commissioner who was nowhere in Atlantic City, was nowhere in that elevator, certainly didn't put his hands on anybody, and then talk about him like he did it? No, Ray Rice did this.
Yeah, we understand.
Okay.
He did that.
We understand.
Stephen A., there's been a history under this commissioner, and certainly the commissioner before him, of looking the other way over domestic violence incidents.
Right.
And we still have pending Ray McDonald, he's still playing.
Totally get it.
Hardy, he's still playing, right? Convicted, appealing.
Right.
Okay? And back to Terrell Suggs, a friend of our show, but he had his incidents in the past.
Skip?
Yes?
Think about this, because you know this better than me. You've been a journalist for over 40 years, Skip Bayless. PED use, drug use, everything. When has a commissioner or a league not been accused of looking the other way on something? Especially with players' associations to consider. Because, by the way, we're going to hear from the Players Association eventually, because you got to remember, I mean, it's going to happen. I'm saying, you're going to hear from this stuff. It happens.
We have an additional statement from the NFL kind of about the looking the other way, not even picking up the ball like you alluded to. We requested from law enforcement any and all information about the incident, including any video that may exist. We spoke to members of the New Jersey State Police and reached out multiple times to the Atlantic City Police Department and the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office. That video was not made available to us, and no one in our office saw it until yesterday.
Roger Goodell and the NFL needs to upgrade their security department to find a way to get a hold of this information. Bottom line, they just, if this is true, true, they need to upgrade their security department. My only point, Skip, that I want to close is by saying this. You know of many issues where leagues have been accused of dragging their feet, but ultimately, the shrapnel of criticism is so profound, and the momentum grows where it forces change. It's doing that here. Let's live with that.
All right. EA, we appreciate you joining us.
Anytime.
Always interesting. We got a perspective from some guy who played the game 14 seasons, like you said, a couple decades involved with the NFL.
Fantasy football's back, and DraftKings.com isn't messing around. DraftKings.com is America's favorite one-week fantasy football site where you could win enormous cash prizes every week. Hurry and get free entry into the Millionaire Maker event, where first place takes home $1 million. Head to DraftKings.com now and enter promo code FOCUS to play free to become a millionaire. DraftKings.com. Bigger events, bigger winnings, bigger millionaires. Enter FOCUS for free entry now at DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
Penn State football off the hook after serving 2 years of its 4-year punishment. The NCAA dropped all the postseason bans and restored all scholarships. Of course, the program received the punishment after the Jerry Sandusky child sex abuse scandal. Here are the notables. Immediate bowl eligibility, originally banned from all postseason play through the 2015 season, but they're now allowed to play in the postseason. Immediate conference championship eligibility, Big Ten title game ban, ran concurrently with the NCAA postseason bowl ban, but they are eligible for the Big Ten title game this season. And full 85 scholarship allotment restored for next year, would have been limited to 80 for the 2015 season. All right, Stephen A., in the past, you were very passionate and felt strongly about the original punishment for Penn State football. How do you feel about this now?
Well, my heart's changed from the perspective that seeing the new regime, Bill O'Brien being there for a few years before James Franklin has arrived, new players, a town that obviously needs to survive and prosper, and all they have is their local football team. I'm not heartless. I understand what the NCAA did here. I concur with their decision. It's not something I would have been inclined to make, to be quite honest with you, because I would have handed it down. I would have never looked back. I would have given Penn State the death penalty. I felt very adamant about that because I felt that the university, the football program, allowed a pedophile, a sexual predator, to parade around campus and torment young boys. And I don't think it gets too much more unforgivable than that. I do understand that the world is filled with second chances, and those individuals were not Jerry Sandusky. I know people will come to the defense of Joe Paterno, along with his son, who was kind enough to come on this show and defend his father, which I admire and respect.
And is still pursuing a lawsuit.
And is still pursuing a lawsuit against the NCAA. I totally understand that. I get where he's coming from. I don't think that Joe Paterno intentionally or just didn't care about kids or whatever. I thought he could have done more because he was Joe Pa. God rest his soul. Administrators have been changed over. I get all of that. So it would be inappropriate, unfair, and heartless for me to say I completely disagree with this decision. I do not disagree with this decision. I just think that the crimes that took place on the campus of Penn State University, perpetrated by Jerry Sandusky, and as far as I'm concerned, enabled by others because of his association with the football program, I would have had this ruling, and I wouldn't have thought about Penn State again. But if somebody's thinking about Penn State, which obviously the NCAA was, and they make this decision, I can't knock it. I'm happy for the residents there. I'm happy for the fans, for the students on campus who had nothing to do with this. I'm happy for James Franklin. I'm happy for those players that are playing on this squad right now. All of them deserve this. It's just that the university, the people that were there when this happened, if there's one thing that is unforgivable, it's what those folks allowed to transpire.
Predictably, I'm very happy and relieved for those people at Penn State that this came down yesterday. They have paid enough for this. And I hate to revisit our original argument about this because it was knockdown, drag out, as you recall.
Yep.
But I tried, I think unsuccessfully, to convince you that you cannot punish an entire fandom and a state college community for the actions or the inactions of one man, Joe Paterno. I'm still not sure what he knew or did not know. Was he past his prime? Was he naive? Did he just look the other way because he still loved his former defensive coordinator and enabled that monster to operate right under his nose and victimize those boys? I don't know exactly what he knew and didn't know. But again, did those actions or inactions give Penn State any competitive advantage on the football field? Well, obviously none. So when you start to punish the entire football program for what one man did or didn't do, it's completely unfair. And I thought it was an outrageous and shocking overreaction on the part of Mark Emmert and the NCAA to deliver the equivalent of what I thought was the death penalty. And I was there in Dallas when SMU received the real equivalent of the death penalty back in the 1980s. And that school and its coach, June Jones, just stepped down, by the way, yesterday. I'm just off the top of my head here, but it never recovered. Penn State fought through this and did pretty well with it. And by next year, should be back to pretty much normal. And I still think fair is fair. They suffered enough, and they did have to pay, what is it, $60 million? $60 million. That's not chicken feed. Somebody had to come up with all that cash, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought they had suffered enough. And I am relieved for them, and I'm proud for them, which, again, all of us get child molestation. That has nothing to do. That's a whole other issue. And you and I were having a hard time separating two issues.
We still do.
Okay, because you held Penn State responsible as a school, as a community.
I wouldn't normally, if this were Vanderbilt, if this were North Carolina, if this were Virginia or somebody, I would not have done that. I was a writer for the Philadelphia Inquirer for 16 years. I was a columnist for my last 7 years there. I am incredibly familiar with what Penn State means to the state of Pennsylvania. And as a result, I'm incredibly aware of how significant, how iconic of a figure Joe Paterno was.
To a fault, you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And if Joe Paterno was not the coach and James Franklin was there, it would not have been a university issue. It became a university issue because Joe Pa ran the show, and he was a godlike figure. This is an individual that the president came to his house to fire him, and Joe Pa said, I'm not going anywhere, and threw him out of his house. And guess what? Kept his job.
He did for a while.
Because he had that kind of clout, okay? This is Joe Pa we're talking about. So to have that kind of cachet, that kind of power, that kind of clout, to be made aware of a defensive coordinator of yours sexually molesting and sodomizing a 10-year-old in the shower, to simply go and report it to your superiors and then leave it alone and don't be bothered with it. But you're Joe Pa. I guarantee you if they told the man that Ohio State was cheating, he would have sat there and put forth more due diligence than that. If they told him that Illinois or Ohio State or somebody had an edge, he would have put forth more of a concerted effort in regards to that. But when it came to the issue of child molestation, could y'all handle this, please? I heard about this. No. I've always felt that way. I will always feel that way. The football program at Penn State played the role of enablers in the whole Jerry Sandusky scandal because Joe Pa and Penn State football is Penn State. And they were allowed to get away with doing it. It is a fact. And I don't care what anybody says. I understand that all of these people had nothing to do with it. And as a result, my heart goes out to them, and that's why I'm happy for them. But I will never look at Penn State the same. I don't blame the students for not feeling that way. I don't blame those players and that new coach for not feeling that way any more than I didn't blame Bill O'Brien, who came up here and talked about it. Didn't blame him either. I'm not blaming the new administrators. I'm not blaming the wonderful folks in State Park. I'm not doing all of that. But the people that were there at that university under Joe Paterno, that knew of Jerry Sandusky, who, by the way, still had office there, had an office there, who was still allowed to work out there, who was still allowed to bring his kids around practice.
That was because of one man. He was responsible,
listen,
right?
That one man was allowed to be responsible. Alumni members pouring money into the university because of that one man. He could do no wrong, huh? Yes, he could.
Okay, just in fairness, is it possible in his 80s, Joe Paterno was just a little past his prime? He was just a little out of touch.
Yes,
he
that's
just
possible.
Didn't grasp exactly what.
That's possible. But remember that Jerry Sandusky, this stuff had come out years earlier, and it had been believed that he was molesting kids for decades. True. Joe Paterno wasn't always in his 80s. No. No. Not buying it.
I just didn't want to see so many innocent bystanders punished.
And I'm good with that. I've modified my position on that. Hell with Penn State, though.
Philadelphia Eagles, the lone bright spot for the NFC East in Week 1, but Philly trailed at halftime 17-0 to Jacksonville. The other three teams, Cowboys, Giants, and Redskins, all lose. QBs were especially bad to start the season. None of the four starting QBs finished in the top 20 in QBR. The NFC East, as advertised. How many wins will it take to win this division, Skip?
What do you think, Stephen A? 7-9? Would that win it?
9-7.
9-7? I'm still going to stick with my prediction here. And again, I'm a happy camper after Week 1 because I did pick the Dallas Cowboys to win this division. Way out on the limb, but the key word in my prediction was by default. D-E-F-A-U-L-T, default.
Yes, we know you can spell.
Was that not a default weekend for the NFC East? Because I did watch much of the first half of the Philadelphia game, and Nick Foles had a rough ride against Jacksonville. Now, to your credit, Philly looked explosive, and I must tell you that obviously to me, Philly looked the best of the four teams that I saw in Week 1. But the biggest X factor in the whole division belongs to the team that almost swept the division last year, came within one Kyle Orton late interception of sweeping the division. That's the Dallas Cowboys. They were 5-1 last year, almost 6-0. If they'd had Tony Romo for the final game, I believe they would have won it and been 6-0. The X factor is Romo's health. He did not look particularly healthy to me. You can say he was just rusty in Week 1. I think he didn't look healthy. I didn't see quite the arm strength. And I definitely, and this is frightening to me, I did not see his usual accuracy. I'm going to remind you, Tony Romo last year had the 5th best quarterback, the QBR, in the league. 31 touchdowns to only 10 interceptions. In the first quarter and a half, he threw 3 interceptions against San Francisco. But what I am hanging my hat on within the division is the unit, the one unit that was quietly, shockingly better than everyone thought was the Cowboy defense. It allowed a total of 14 points in 4 quarters to San Francisco. Now, maybe that had to do with a struggling 49ers offense. But 14 points by a defense that appeared to be historically bad in the preseason, I think that's pretty great. So if Romo can get healthier, I still like this team's chances with Anthony Spencer getting healthy. He's not healthy yet. Orlando Scandrick coming off suspension. We're going to get a vote here pretty soon, I think, about the PED, the new rules. It could free up Orlando Scandrick to be available this Sunday. I don't know. Could. But the point is, Dallas will get healthier on defense, get people back on defense. And with RG3 a shell of himself and Eli Manning last night a shell of himself, all of a sudden this division looks as up for grabs as I can ever remember it at this point in the season, where it's just completely wide open. And the Eagles should be the favorite, still are the favorite, but Dallas matches up well with Chip Kelly. And I don't know exactly why, but I remind you, Dallas won at Philly last year 17-3. Held Philly to 3 points at home.
I'd like to see them do that again.
Well, we might get a chance. We just might get a chance.
I find your position laughable.
Okay.
I'm
shocked that you do.
I mean, because, listen, you lost all credibility with this division when you picked Dallas to win. I mean, my goodness. The Dallas Cowboys, you are the ultimate contrarian. You're unbelievable. The Dallas Cowboys as an NFC East crown.
And so, wait, you're making a case for whom?
The Eagles.
Oh, really?
The Eagles.
17-0 at half?
That's right. You know what?
17-0?
Unbelievable. You're unbelievable. You know what, Skip? Your suit today looks really good. It looks better than the one you had on yesterday. Today's a new day. You know what? The second half.
You just insulted my suit yesterday?
It was all right.
It was at Ted Baker.
It was all right. The point, Ted Baker,
yeah.
Really? Okay. The point that I'm trying to make to you, Skip, is this.
It's out of your price range. What can I say?
I feel you on that. Well, I'm thinking this, Skip. The Philadelphia Eagles scored 34 unanswered points in the second half. They were balling. You got Shady McCoy. You got Macklin, who's looking good. Nick Foles got himself together. Offensive line has some trouble because their guard went down. We'll see what happens.
No,
I'm just saying
he's down.
He's probably down.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it. The Redskins, they don't look like RG3 doesn't look great. And don't get me started on the Cowboys and the Giants. Yes, default, Default. I get it.
You can spell.
I can spell too, okay, Skip Bayless? But whether it's default or not, the Philadelphia Eagles are the best team in the NFC East. They just are. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to beat up on each other to some degree because rivalries are rivalries. But when they go outside of their division and they're playing other teams,
like Jacksonville?
I definitely think that the Eagles are going to be better than the Dallas Cowboys, because the Dallas Cowboys don't have a defense. The Giants don't seem to have much of anything on offense. And the Washington Redskins, you know what? I don't even know if they've got a coach yet. I'm looking at Jay Gruden. I mean, that arena football stuff you was pulling with those trick plays, that ain't going to cut it. And RG3 trying to be a pocket passer, no read option being used, can't be as evasive as he was his rookie year. Not the same. You got Deshaun Jackson. You've got Pierre Garçon. You got Jordan Reed. You got Alfred Morris and Halou Jr. coming out of the backfield. They can run the football. You got all of these weapons, but it doesn't mean anything if RG3 can't go. And we're debating whether or not Kirk Cousins won't be seen before week 5. So to me, I look at the NFC East and I say the only semblance of continuity in existence is the Philadelphia Eagles. Because the Dallas Cowboys, if they stay the same, it's only because they have very little talent. I mean, expect to see Michael Sam any day now, man. We're going to see Michael.
I hope so.
Michael Sam off the practice squad. We're going to see it because they need somebody to rush the passer.
I thought they did okay the other day.
You know
Selvey?
What? They looked okay, Selvey.
Vincey?
So Selvey could play. But I'm just saying, I just look at the Cowboys. Defense is going to be a problem. The Giants' offense is going to be a problem. With the Redskins, continuity, togetherness, that's going to be a problem. And as a result, the Philadelphia Eagles are going to steal this division with a 9-7 record.
Help me out. I'm foggy on this, but is Deshaun Jackson, where do you wind up?
Washington.
He's not in Philly anymore.
Washington.
They're going to miss Deshaun. They missed him this time.
Really? In the first half?
One last point.
In the first half?
You realize.
They got Darren Sproles now, Skip.
Your Eagles did win their first game. They just played the easiest game by far on their schedule. Jacksonville at home.
Let's wait and
we
see.
know.
Let's wait and see how
wait and see? I'm not waiting and see.
Gus Bradley might know what he's doing a little bit.
You say 9 wins?
At least 9 wins.
I'm sticking with 10.
All I'm saying to you, I'm not saying it's just going to be 9. The Eagles may win 10 games. I'm simply saying all it will take to win the division is 9 wins.
Last year, 10 won the division, but if the Cowboys won that Week 17 game, 9 and 7 would have done it.
That would have done it.
Oh, you mean the 8-8 Cowboys?
Good point.
You mean the 8-8 Cowboys? You mean the Cowboys team that hasn't seen an above 500 record in 4 years? You talking about that?
2009, right?
Really?
They're playing for the division crown with Kyle Orton.
Really?
Yeah, the Eagles almost lost.
How about last night's action? Another Chargers collapse on Monday Night Football. San Diego led in Arizona by 11 points in the fourth quarter, but Carson Palmer leads the Cards back to a win. Chargers done in again by mishaps. Guys, I thought North Turner was no longer in San Diego. What do we learn from this game?
Stephen A. Smith, I must admit to you that what I learned last night, and unfortunately I stayed up and watched the whole game, and I'm paying the price today.
Yes.
Because I'm not in a good mood about it. But what I learned, what was it, like 2 o'clock in the morning? I didn't even look. I was afraid to look.
I think it ended up like 1:37, something like that. I know it was almost 2 o'clock.
I learned that my pick of the Chargers to be a surprise breakout team and to win or steal the AFC West is in early trouble. Because as you pointed out, Chargers are up 17-6 going into the fourth quarter. Midway through that quarter, 7.5 minutes left, Phillip Rivers, up 17-12 at that point, faces a third down at the 29. They're well within field goal range. Can we see that play, please? And Phillip Rivers just muffs the snap. I don't know what he was doing. I don't know if he got caught off guard. It looked like he just missed it. And the ball goes backwards, and they go out of field goal range. And all of a sudden, they have to punt. Moments after that, Arizona is backed up 3rd and 10 at its 9-yard line. And the San Diego Chargers allow Carson Palmer to run for a first down.
Yes.
To run for a first. Carson Palmer, I didn't know he could run. No, seriously, I didn't know he could actually go like this and put one foot in front of another and run.
Arthritis
no arthritis. Okay, maybe that was it. He ran for an easy first down.
Spry 34.
Spry, yeah. And they're out of jail, and then he makes a couple of really big-time throws, and that little John Brown makes a play at the end, and all of a sudden...
Pittsburgh State in Kansas.
Yeah, Pittsburgh State. You got it. Way to go. And all of a sudden, my Chargers lose 18-17, and it's same old Chargers.
I say same old Chargers. I think that Arizona's a little bit better than we give them credit for without Washington, without Dockett.
Yep.
But you still had Peterson. You still had Cromartie. You still had that defense that was getting after Phillip Rivers. Now, he was doing his thing, but they were getting after him. They were putting a lot of pressure. They were they were somewhat neutralizing the running game, even though Ryan Matthews is really fast. I didn't realize how fast he could be, but they weren't that. They didn't do much offensively in their running game. They only ran for a total of 52 yards. Meanwhile, with Ellington, with Palmer, with Dwight and those boys, they ended up running for 109 yards if you're Arizona. But to me, I was kind of impressed with Carson Palmer, 108.4 rating, 24-37 passes. What I was really impressed by, Skip, as well, is that they did this without Fitzgerald. One reception for 22 yards.
I mean, it was just one.
Just one reception.
Yeah. What was that about?
I mean, listen, he's going to have to get the ball more. But I like this kid, John Brown. I like Ellington. I like Floyd.
Yep.
Okay? I like what they have. I mean, if this defense can continue to play like that, and they get Fitzgerald more involved offensively. I mean, there's still some question marks about Fitzgerald and about their running game overall.
Yep.
But I like Arizona. Arizona's a good team, and Bruce Arians is a good coach. And they play hard, and they're active. And by the way, they have a home crowd. That home crowd was real noisy. Of course, a couple of problems late in the game for
They did.
You know, he had to call a timeout one time. Lucky he got the timeout because he was they was waiting. He kept calling for the snap.
It was 4th and 2.
Right? It was like 4th and 2.
So you think Arizona could finish second in that division?
I think it's possible.
They were 7-2 last year.
Not gonna
last
finish
9 games.
10-6. Yeah, I mean,
7-2 to close.
Yeah.
So what did we learn? That Arizona's good at home?
I think we learned Arizona's good, period.
Okay.
There's a lot of teams that they're going to be able to beat. I would not sleep on them. The jury's still out on Carson Palmer. We're not sold on him because he has a good game last night, turned around and throw out and play like garbage next week. That's who Carson Palmer is. But we know he can fling that football. We know he likes to go deep. We know he's got a deep weapon in Floyd, who he connected with last night.
Yep.
We know what Fitzgerald could do. One reception for 22 yards ain't cutting it. Fitzgerald ain't lose that much of a step. Plus, he's a big wide receiver, so there are some things that he can do.
Yep.
But I like this kid, John Brown, because of his versatility. You can dip and dunk it to him. And he's lightning quick, and he's so small. So when you're that short and that quick and elusive, you're so difficult to find. Plus, you move the chains. I think they can make things happen in that regard. And as a result of being able to move the chains, I think that is going to make their defense fresh, more formidable, and I think that's going to help them. So Arizona, I'm not sleeping on them.
Okay, I'm not either.
Bruce Arians compared him to what, Marvin Harrison?
Yeah,
that was pretty high praise.
Well, you know, yes and no. I mean, this guy is small, a little smaller than Marvin Harrison, a little faster.
I think he's a little quicker. I agree. And bottom line for my Chargers, I'm going to find out a little more now that Seattle is coming to San Diego.
Yeah, we'll learn a lot more this weekend. Monday Night Football, right out of the gates, Megatron doing what he does. 7 catches, 164 receiving yards. The game's first 2 touchdowns to spot the Lions a 14-0 lead, and they held on for the convincing win over the Giants. And talent, respecting talent, LeBron tweeting. One of his tweets had a hashtag, my favorite player in the world. Kevin Durant says, you know you're sick at what you do when we call you Megatron. So both NBA stars respecting it. We all know he's great, but could you see him winning the MVP?
No, I cannot.
No
Wide receiver's never done it.
Because to win the MVP, I would have to rely on Matthew Stafford having a career year as well in getting you the football. And I'm not sure I can rely on him to be consistent enough to do it. I know Matthew Stafford is gifted. I know he can fling that football. I know Megatron had over 1,400 receiving yards last year. But so did A.J. Green. You know, I mean, you know, you look at the Antonio Browns of the world in Pittsburgh, they can ball a little bit. You look at Demaryius Thomas, he also had over 1,400 receiving yards, and he's got Peyton Manning throwing him the football instead of Matthew Stafford. So I think when you consider it that way, I think you're going to look to the quarterback. If Megatron has a breakout year, it'll be because Stafford is having a breakout year. And if they have to give it to one of the two, it's going to be the quarterback. That's why. It's not
Stafford was, I'm going back 3 years ago when he had the 45 touchdowns and they got to the first round of the playoffs at New Orleans and got blown out.
I'm not going to say that Megatron's skills and numbers won't deserve it.
Yeah.
But it'll be because Stafford got him the ball, and that means Stafford would get it. So I don't see it happening.
I'm going to pay this man the ultimate respect and I'm going to give him an outside shot at winning MVP. He was the MVP of that game last night.
Yes, he was.
I think you would have to agree.
No question.
But the Giants factored in because they did choose to mostly single cover him with DRC, just as Dallas, as we talked about earlier, tried Brandon Carr, and it cost him 329 yards. So he plays the position in which you can try to take Megatron out of the game completely with double or triple coverage. On the other hand, Stafford has so much confidence in him that I remember a game, I'm going back again 3 years ago in Dallas. Remember the big comeback that Detroit had in the second half in Dallas? And Stafford was just throwing it up into double coverage because he knew Megatron could just rise up over anybody and snatch it out of the air. And that, in that regard, Calvin isn't as fast as Randy Moss was, but I think he's more athletic and has better hands going up. Like he can snatch jump balls better.
He's the big time. He's big time. He's in a class all by himself.
By himself.
Wide receiver.
Yeah.
Demaryius Thomas, A.J. Green, Antonio Brown, and these boys, they're big time as well, but they ain't Megatron. They're not on his level.
Okay, so the point becomes if people are triple covering by mid-year Calvin Johnson, then what happens with Golden Tate? Does he start catching 8 or 10 balls?
Yes, he does.
What happens to Fourier?
6 last night?
Ebron, you know, these other the tight ends. Do they start catching a bunch of balls? Does he start flipping balls to Reggie Bush, who's going to get yards after catch? But I still say, I think Detroit is going to have a big year. I think the offense is going to have an even bigger year, and I think that Megatron is virtually unstoppable, that he's still, even his bad games will look pretty good.
And when you see, it's one of the things that amazes me, Skip, you'll need a first down from him and everything.
Yeah.
You know teams, whether it's in their cover 2 or whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. Somehow, some way, he just seems like he gets open with ease. He's such a big target.
Yeah.
There's little to nothing you could do with him.
6'5", 240.
I love the commercials. I miss the commercials with him and P. Diddy, where P. Diddy says, you be Megatron, I'll be Cal. I'll be Cal.
Yeah.
You know, I love those commercials. I miss them.
All right.
Bring them back.
So you say a chance at that?
I give him an outside shot because I think they're going to be a hot team.
He is Megatron.
Goes by one name. That says
Megatron.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you. First Take tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN2. Carrie will be back tomorrow as well.